is Katie, and I'm from the United Kingdom. I'm from a county called Shropshire. I kind of have lived all over the UK, so I'm a bit of a nomad, but this is where my home is, and this is where I've settled. So I am the founder of A Perfect Poppy. I'm the founder of Strong and Brave website, and I also have a podcast called Strong Tea, which is talking all about taboo topics, things that people stick their head in the sand over. And it's kind of how I came across your podcast. Yeah. So I kind of got in touch with you. We had a bit of an initial chat just about things that were important, sharing and mental health. And I have quite a traumatic story, which I have found not only helps me to talk about because it helps me process what happened, but I have found that it has resonated with an awful lot of people on the social media platforms that I have and the websites that I've built. I find that a lot of people reach out through those and say, no one's talking to me because this happened and I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't know how to help myself. And I think that's really sad because I think this happens to an awful lot of people.
And strange too, right? Because I mean, how many different topics, and you haven't even shared yet what you're exactly talking about. But you can insert the same phrase here. How many things can you search and look for and find, and here you are, saying that right there, that you still feel alone and lost and not sure where to turn to, right? I mean, it speaks volumes to what the world needs, right?
Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, grief, which is a major part of my story, is so unique for so many different people. And everyone suffers it differently. Myself and my husband both suffered grief, but we both suffered it very differently. Same with my family, my friends. It's a very difficult path to travel.
Absolutely,
and it was trying to find people. I know in the early days, I was desperate to try and find someone that my story resonated with so I could say, oh my God, this is help me. And now I try and be that person. So my story starts in 2020 when my husband and I first started trying for a baby. And it took us a little while longer than expected, only because I got diagnosed later with polycystic ovaries. So I struggled to conceive initially, but once we had some help from a fertility specialist, it was all guns blazing and I was pregnant. And it was amazing because I hadn't expected it to happen so quickly after the treatment. And it was a really joyful time. I look back now and it was incredibly naive to be that, excited, but I still think that's the way that pregnancy should be.
Sure.
And I think a lot of people don't get that. So I was very, very excited. I promised myself I wouldn't buy any baby clothes, and then I bought loads. I bought loads before we found out we were having a girl, and then on the 20-week scan we found out we were having a little girl. So I still had a Chewbacca onesie that I had bought for her, and I was like, no, I'm still going to put her in that. And so it was amazing. And I had what everyone called a textbook pregnancy. There were no concerns along the way. Nothing was ever flagged up to me that there was any issues. And so I kind of just went on my merry way thinking everything's going to be great, naively, everything's going to be perfect. And in April 2021, we went into hospital. I was a week and 6 days overdue. And I don't know how you guys do things over there, because I know you don't have a national health service, so to speak, which we do. But the thing is, over here, if you go over 40 weeks, they kind of like you to be induced because they sort of say, it's healthier to. So I was 41 plus 6, and I didn't want to be induced because I was of the mind that as soon as you start forcing something, that's not your body doing it naturally.
I'm smiling here because I had no idea anything about this conversation at all, when we first had our son, but those are almost the exact words from my wife, that didn't want to go that route. Understood, the medical side of it, and the need that like it's beyond what they are saying is, normal.
Yeah.
But the other side of it is right, that you're safe inside mom, right? And
Yeah.
you don't want to force anything. It's not what nature is telling you. So yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's very,
Yeah.
very similar actually.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense
It
why they
does.
do it. But there's a lot of box ticking exercises to be done
Hmm.
with the medical services over here. And, you know, they're sort of seeing you as on the page, oh my goodness, she's almost
Yeah.
2 weeks overdue. We need to do something.
Yeah.
So we had a long conversation with the hospital, and I wanted a water birth. And they said, yes, okay, we can induce you, but we can induce you with a certain way that will still allow you to have a water birth, because some inductions, they don't allow that.
Hmm.
So it was all discussed and it was all planned, and I was to go in the following day for an induction. And I was so excited. Like, my
Yeah.
husband and I had like prepped the whole house. We'd got all the changing mats out and everything. So we were like, it's happening. We ended up going into hospital, and I was induced. And a lot of people say that when you're induced, nothing happens for ages. And, it takes a long time. But they gave me prostaglandin gel, which is a gel that goes inside you, which forces the stimulation
Yeah.
to create the contractions. And I went into what's called hyperstimulation. So I went into labor quite quickly. Um, I was transferred. The next couple of hours kind of went through in a bit of a daze, because
Yeah.
I,
I can
I
imagine.
didn't really have any concept of time. It was just incredibly painful, and I kept being sick with the pain, and I didn't really know what was happening. My husband was sat there with his watch and watching, and he's sort of saying,
Yeah.
this
That's
is
what you
happening.
do, right?
This is happening every so many minutes, and I'm like, I don't care. Give me the gas and air. Um, so that was kind of up until about midnight. And
Mm.
then they said, right, we think you're ready to give birth now. So we think you're dilated enough. So we're going to send you upstairs to the labour ward. And unfortunately, the key term there was we think.
Yeah.
And there were, and I won't go into a huge amount of detail, but there were a lot of failings with the medical
So,
service that I was given. And as a result of that, we went up, and I was in the birthing pool, and they expected things to happen very, very quickly, and they didn't. And it wasn't until they brought in a specialist and I was examined, and they said, right, we need to get you down to theatre straight away. And I was like, okay.
oh,
And the
yeah.
only question I asked was, can my husband come? And they said yes. So they gave him some scrubs. And the next thing, I'm in theatre, and they said, your husband can't be here. Because I said, where is he? They said, he can't be here because we now need to do an emergency C-section and get your baby out right now. That was the first
Yeah.
kind of glimpse that I had any indication that something might be wrong. But by that point, they were forcing, and I mean forcing, a mask onto my face to make me breathe the gas in so that I would go to sleep. Um, I, I, this part of what happened to me was extremely traumatic, and I still
Sure.
have this in a little box, which I choose at the moment not to deal with because I find it too much.
Yeah.
So I woke up several hours later. I asked where my baby was, and the person who was in charge just said, we'll get someone for you now. That's all they said, and they left me on my own for
Like
must have
hours.
been 10-15 minutes. My husband turned up, and I said, what's going on? Where is she? And he said, I don't know, but they had some problems in theatre, but they told me that she left and she was okay. So I was like, all right, okay, fine. So there's
Right.
all this shock of coming around of where is she?
Yeah.
What's happening?
What's going on?
And
Yeah.
no indication. Anyway, the next thing we know, we were being told by a neonatologist that our daughter was gravely ill, and that if she did survive, she would have almost no quality of life. And going from, you know, everything's perfect, your baby's going to be born in a minute,
Yeah. In a
to
minute.
your child's going to die, which is
Yeah.
essentially what they were saying. Um, I don't, I don't even think at that point it went in. The shock
Sure.
was too much, and I just said, I want to see her. And that was really difficult. Seeing her in the NICU unit was very, very tough. And they kind of talked about um, something called cold mat treatment, which is when your child is born and they have to resuscitate. They can put them on this cold mat, which will help stimulate
Kind of, yeah.
brain activity, and it helps sort of rejuvenate the cells that might have been damaged due to the lack of
Yeah.
oxygen. There was the talk of this, and so at that point I was thinking there's still hope. There's still hope she's going to be okay. This
Yeah.
is going to be fine. So I was clinging to that. And I mean, they called for a second opinion. They got another specialist in to like ask, and he said that I'm afraid there is no point. And also that's difficult to hear because you're just like, that's my
Wait a
child.
minute. Yeah.
Um and from there it just went from bad to worse. She got more poorly, and they sort of said, you're going to need to say your goodbyes. And I remember I remember phoning my sister, and my sister and I aren't particularly, we don't have a particularly close relationship. We don't talk to each other all the time, but I was like, I just need to speak to her. And it was just
So,
that one person that I was like, I need to speak to her.
yeah.
And because I just couldn't process what was happening. And I was like, I don't know why this is happening. I don't know why is this happening?
What's going on? Yeah.
And it was just this constant spiral of, I don't know what's happening. Why is it happening? I don't know what's happening. Why is it happening? And it just, nothing would sink in. And my family, my mum and dad and my mother-in-law came into the hospital, and they got to meet her. And then they basically said, we have to take all the wires out and you'll be able to hold her. And that was it. And she passed away in my arms. And she was 12 hours old. And the impact, I mean, they gave me so much morphine because I was post C-section,
Yeah.
that I think they probably gave me more than I maybe would have had. And then they gave me where they link you up and you have a little button and you can just I just kept pressing it
Kept
because I
pressing
was
it.
just like, I can't, I don't, I
I don't
don't,
want to feel.
I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
And it was just horrendous. It was the worst and will remain the worst moment of my entire
Really.
life.
I mean,
Mm.
I don't even, I mean, you can't even, there's nothing you could say, to help people even like picture, imagine that unless you, like you've said, I mean, unless you've experienced that too, like you can only just kind of feel that like this is what's supposed to, how hard that's supposed to feel. And that doesn't even come close, um, to how you feel. But so then how does that, because here you talk about, I mean, you had a child,
Mm.
and you still have to deal with, what comes after having a child, regardless of, the outcome. How does that now impact going, start, that part of the story now, moving forward? I mean, I hate even saying it like that, but, going to the next day, what does that look like as far as, we talk about postpartum depression and all that kind of stuff. How does that, how did that start, coming into play versus, having, getting to go home, with a
Yeah.
child and dealing with the grief that way and
Yeah.
depression that comes along with after birth, right?
Yeah. I think the shock of
Yeah.
it was still, I mean, it lasted probably for about 3 or 4 days. I was just in
Yeah.
a daze. And um, the hospital wanted me to stay in longer. And I was kind of, it's a really weird sensation because I didn't want to be there because I was like, my child died here and
That's
people
not
are
how, yeah.
responsible. Versus I don't want to leave her,
Yeah.
because she'll be here on her own. And that was even though she wasn't living anymore, I didn't want to leave her on her own because she was a
Yeah.
baby. But my husband and I were like, no, we think actually going home, being around family, being in our own bed would probably help.
Yeah.
So we left, and we came home, and my parents and my mother-in-law had basically gone through the house like a tornado and just taken everything that we had
Everything out.
gotten ready, put it in the nursery and just shut the door. And I remember my husband drove the car back because I couldn't drive.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And he had to help me into the house, not only because of the pain, but just the sort of physical, uh,
sure,
the shock and the grief. I just felt like I was carrying so much.
yeah,
And I sort of limped into the house, and I remember just sitting down at the dining table and just staring. And our family didn't know what to do. They were like, "Do you want a cup of tea? Yes, very British, isn't
yeah,
it, to ask if you want a cup of tea? Do you want any food? Do you want it?" And I just kept saying,
yeah,
I just want Poppy. I just want my baby."
yeah,
And of course, no one can do anything for that, because you
yeah,
just, and the physical recovery that comes with that is obviously much quicker than the mental recovery. But I remember the next morning, I got in the shower and I just could not stop crying. And
yeah,
my husband actually got in to the shower with me and just held me, and I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed. And it was the biggest release, but it didn't make me feel any better.
it didn't
Which,
do
whereas
anything. Yeah,
now when I cry, it's kind of a release and I feel a bit
yeah,
better. But at the time, it was just so painful. And I kind of felt like, it's so weird. Your brain does the weirdest things when you grieve, because you just
yeah,
find yourself starting to almost like make a deal with the devil. Like, I'll do anything. I will give you my soul if you just turn back the clock. Just 12 hours, just 24 hours, please. Just, I
yeah,
will make different decisions. I will do different things, and just nothing works.
yeah,
And that went on for weeks. The whole what if I'd just done this, what if we hadn't been
yeah,
induced, what if we'd gone in on a different day to be induced. And I tortured myself, and then came the guilt. Then was, what was it my fault? Did I do something wrong? Should I have picked up the signs? Should I have, noticed something was happening? And
yeah,
this was just so much to deal with, that I was just like, I can't do this. I
yeah,
can't. And I could not see a way forward. It just felt dark. Everything felt
yeah,
incredibly dark. And I I've spoken to people through my website who sadly have um not continued that fight and taken their own lives, being in the same situation, because it has been too dark for them. And I
yeah.
think, had I not had the love around me that I did, and the fact that I didn't want to put my family and my husband through anything else,
Else,
there were mornings that I would wake up and I would think it would just be easier if I just didn't wake up. It wasn't like I'm going to do anything or I don't want to be here.
but
It would
there's
just
that
be so
thought.
much easier,
Yeah,
because it was so hard. And every time I spoke to the doctors, they said, "Oh, we'll put you on antidepressants." That was their
yeah,
answer. And I
yeah.
was like, "No, because if you drug me up now, I'm just going to have to deal with it in 6 months or a
Later,
year,
right?
And
Yeah,
I was very much, I need to deal with this now. That's the
yeah,
sort of person I am. And my husband is as well. And we ended up going to a therapy session about 3 weeks after. Never been to therapy with my husband before or anything like that. So we were sat in this room together, and this therapist must have thought,
what's going on with
what the
them?
hell are these guys doing?
Yeah,
She was just like, it's far too soon. I'm like, well, who are you to say it's too soon?
yeah,
You don't know. But
yeah.
yeah, it obviously was too soon. But the only thing I did was I took sleeping tablets to help me get through a couple of the nights, which I found
Nights.
difficult. But I didn't stick with them. And then it just kind of became the long road to, right, well, what do you do from here?
Yeah,
Where do you go? Because you haven't just lost a child and a person that you love, you've lost all that hope that you had for the future. That 9 months of pregnancy, being thinking, oh, I wonder
planning.
what they're going to be like. I wonder when their
Yeah,
first smile's going to be, when they're going to do this, what are they going to be? All that's gone. And you essentially wipe the slate clean. And,
you're
a friend,
forced to move forward. Yeah,
yeah, and a friend of mine who lost her daughter within a couple of weeks, I met her through a grief group. And she said, this is the stark reality of it. On paper, nothing's changed. I didn't have a child and I still don't have a child.
Yeah,
And that's hard because you're not
that
losing
is.
someone that you've had in your life for ages. You don't have the memories. You just have everything that you would have had. And that sucks.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's like one of those, that truly is one of those, hard truths. And, that people hear and go, oh, that was cruel to say. And it may not have been the right time to hear it, or the right, maybe it wasn't presented in a, compassionate way, but it is unfortunately, like, kind of, supportive as well, to kind of get your brain to kind of like, oh, oh, okay.
Mm.
All right, what to do. But that might be the one thing though, that everybody's process of grief obviously is unique and different, and sure, we've got the stages that we all go through in some shape or form and pattern. But I think from my experience, the one thing you said that is universal to everybody is the difficult part being that everybody else's life went forward and
Hmm.
the world around you moves forward. And you look at people you don't even know walking on the street going like, how can you not be upset for me, for
Yeah.
what happened? And they don't even know you, they're not even talking to you, they're just walking near you
Yeah.
because your time has stopped. And you're still in that dark spot, as you said, and trying to process everything.
Yeah.
And it almost makes people you know more depressed, more angry,
Yeah.
whatever the case, whatever strong emotion is popping out, because they don't understand, like, how can you move forward? I'm not, this happened
Yeah.
to me, and that can be hard to
Yeah. Yeah.
overcome.
Yeah. I think it was about four weeks later.
Yeah.
Um, my mum and dad said, do you want to go out for, a bit of a drive? And we have a store over here called B&Q, which I think is like your Home Depot type thingy. So
Okay.
all
I
your
appreciate all these translations along the way. I think I'm gonna have to cut this out, but I think my favorite one so far is, and I knew what it was, but for a second there, I was like, wait, theater? What is she talking about? Why did she go to the movies? Oh, right,
Oh, yeah,
right,
yeah,
got it,
yeah.
got it.
Do you guys not say that? Yeah, no.
The operating
Operating
room. I
room.
miss.
Yeah,
Yeah, right.
yeah,
And no, thank you. I appreciate that one too. I would have just kept going and been like, wherever she's going, I'll figure out the
yeah.
store name. Got
Well, it's kind of
it.
like a DIY store, and
Gotcha.
our garden was in the process of being landscaped, and it started. Ironically, the work started the day we came home from hospital, and I was just like, I don't want to deal with any of this. I
What is
don't
going on?
just
Yeah.
like, why is this happening? I don't. Why are we even? What's the point? That was the
Yeah.
whole thing. What is the point? And my mum and dad said, well, why don't we go to B&Q and just, have a walk around and see if we can get some paint to paint the fence? I was like, yeah, right. And I went and I just got really annoyed because I was just like, all these people shopping for paint and light bulbs and
Yeah.
pointless crap that you're just
Yeah.
like,
You're worried about the finish on your floor, and I
yeah,
lost a child. You know.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the frustration, it really hit me. And I'd asked someone for some help, and he obviously gave me an answer I didn't like, and I snapped at him, and I came away from there, and my mum had apologized on my behalf, and I was just like, don't apologize for me. Uh, but then I was just like, yeah, okay, it's not his fault. But
It's not his fault.
it
Yeah.
was the frustration of people not knowing
Yeah.
and how they react, but also the people that did know. And
And
bearing
they
in
react.
mind, I had
Yeah.
done what thousands, millions of people do. I had announced my pregnancy on social media. And so many people were like, oh my goodness, have you had the baby yet? And I was just like, there's only one way to deal with this. I have to put a post up because I didn't want to deal with everyone on a
Asking
one-to-one
constantly.
basis. It was
Yeah.
just like, I have to so I put a post up. And I didn't talk about everything that had happened. It was just a
Yeah.
very simple, our darling daughter was born this morning and she gained her wings this afternoon. There were complications during pregnancy, etc., etc. And some people who I expected to step up and be there weren't.
All right.
And there were people who I hadn't spoken to. You know what Facebook is like and social media. You just like, you got people on there from like decades ago that you don't
Yeah.
speak to, and some people were just amazing. People that just came out of the woodwork and were
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm so sorry if I can do anything. And the number of people as well that said, oh, something similar happened to us. It's not the same, but we had
Yeah.
a very late miscarriage, or we had a stillbirth, or we had this, or we had that. And all of a sudden, this whole world is opened
Opens up.
to you
Yeah.
that you're just like, oh my God, this child loss affects so many
Yeah.
people, and it's something just no one's talking about.
Yeah.
Which,
There's the definition of when you hear that cliche saying you're not alone. There's what it means, that people come out and show you that.
mm,
I mean, it's a beautiful thing. It's an unfortunate
mm,
way that it comes to be, but I think we miss that there's a meaning behind those phrases, that just becomes so watered down. But that's what it means, is not necessarily the friend or family member that you expected. It's the people that were in hiding too, waiting for that moment, whatever you want to call it,
hmm
to be able to say, hey, like, I'm right next to you. I don't know you,
yeah.
but I know your story to some degree.
Yeah. And this is one of the reasons I reached out on the grief groups. I found over here we have a group, it's a charity called Tommy's, which is a child loss charity. And it supports parents, miscarriage, stillbirth, neonatal death. And they have a Facebook support group. And I met two incredible girls on there who had both been through
Similar.
sort of same but different.
Yeah.
We'd all lost our daughters within weeks of each other, but
Hmm.
under very different circumstances. And whilst I said right at the start of this that myself and my husband were both grieving for our daughter, but I needed to speak to another mother. I needed to speak to someone that had carried a child for 9 months and then not taken it home,
Hmm.
and I met these two girls, and one's in Berlin and one's in London, and it, it's the sort of people that you probably wouldn't even look at twice in the street. You wouldn't have a connection with if it weren't for them. And all of a sudden, we were talking about the worst thing in the world happened to us, and it became this support group that just the three of us, that on a day-to-day basis we were messaging each other saying, oh my God, you'll never guess what someone said to me today, or why are people so stupid, or and it became this ranting monologue that was really supportive, because
Yeah.
actually you needed to hear that other people thought the same way that you did, and you weren't
Sure.
just going crazy, and you weren't just
Yeah.
annoyed for no reason. But it helped so much, and
Yeah.
so many people don't find that.
And I think that's what people, and I'm going to say ordinary people, that, in the sense that, like, haven't experienced that. Like, I think almost like that's what, like, you need to hear, because, the person that just, asked if you wanted a cup of tea, or the friend that saw the post and didn't say anything. That's why,
Mm,
because you're not sure where the line is. Like, can I
yeah.
still say the things I did before this? Is that going to trigger something? And it's okay if it does. You learn
Mm,
that, oh, okay, I can't say that right now, that's too sensitive. Or I can't, act, but we don't want to even come close to that line. So I think, you know finding somebody and having those conversations, at least for yourself, then kind of trickles effect, outward, that,
yeah.
oh, you can still go through something traumatic for you,
Hmm.
and whatever degree that means, you plug in that definition and still, be yourself. You just have to be aware that, for that person that you're, talking to,
Hmm.
that's there. And you don't know how they don't know how it's
Yeah.
gonna come out. They don't know what's gonna do. So just kind of be patient
Yeah.
and
I think
graceful.
I think the hardest thing though is when people don't say anything at all. And
Mhm.
I understand why people don't, but it's
Yeah.
like people running for the hills. And I put a post out 6 weeks after just saying thank you for all the support, and like our house
Yeah.
looked like some sort of garden show. There were flowers everywhere. We
Yeah.
had so many incredible cards, and it was amazing to see people reach out. And so I wanted to thank people.
Yeah.
Um, and I put this post out, and I had probably about 10 or 12 people get in touch from that saying, because I'd said on this post, you know, a lot of people don't know what to say, and that's okay, but just don't not say anything. And a
Yeah.
lot of people got in touch and said, I didn't know what to say, and I didn't want to say
Yeah.
the wrong thing. And I was like,
Yeah.
just say,
Say that.
say that. Just say, I
Yeah.
don't know what to say. This is the worst thing anyone could ever experience. And I
Yeah.
don't know what to say, but, I'm sending you some love. Even if you don't
Something.
want to
Yeah.
say I'm here for you because you're just like, I
Yeah.
can't deal with that. Just say, I'm sending you some love. And that
Yeah.
means more than
Then
just
nothing.
doing a bunk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because what happens, and I think I talk about this like every now and then, just, family related, with us that, we have two kids, and I have family members that I think they probably said something when our son was born. He's almost 3. But no anything else after that. No wishes of happy birthdays, no checking in, no nothing, and close.
Hmm.
But the more you don't say something, and I'm relating this to a kid, but stick in anything else you want, the more you don't say something, then it becomes more and more awkward.
Hmm.
And then years down the road, you're like, I haven't spoken to cousin such and such in, 10
Yeah.
years. And it was because of that moment right there that,
Yeah.
you didn't at least say that you didn't know what to say,
Yeah.
or whatever was making you uncomfortable, that,
Yeah.
maybe in this case, the person that didn't say something, they were trying to have kids too, and they
Yeah.
can't for whatever reason. And this happened. So that shut them down, but you
Yeah.
didn't at least take one step, like you said, just say, look, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm saying, but here's something to let
Yeah.
you know that I am
Yeah.
here,
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's common in grief.
sure.
And it's the girl who I co-host our Strong Tea podcast with. I met her, God, I can't even tell you when it was. It was like way back, 2014 maybe.
Hmm.
I met her through a friend, and we haven't spoken all that time, but friends on social media. And she got in touch, and she was just like, I can't even imagine,
Yeah,
but I'm here if you want to talk. And she'd lost her mum quite recently, and we ended up having a conversation after not speaking to each other for all those years.
all those
And
years.
now we're like besties. And, we have this podcast together where we talk about our grief, we talk about loss, and, amongst many, many other things. And
Yeah,
it's surprising. It's surprising when you talk to people about experiences of grief, how many people say, oh, I really expected more from that person, or
yeah,
really surprised by that response. And also the things that people say, which are so unhelpful when you are experiencing grief. You just, I don't know. Some people I want to pick up and shake and think, what part of your brain made you think it was okay to say that?
the uncomfortable part,
Yeah.
the awkward part that was like, I don't know what else to do. Does this work? Oh shoot, I can't take that back. But
Yeah.
that's hard. Because how do you look at it as somebody that was looking for something to be said, and this came out in just the wrong way, and not judge them for that and set the
Yeah.
clock back, but they're like, all right, well, now I'm not going to say another thing for another 5 years to anybody that loses.
Yeah.
How do we make that narrative change in the sense of supporting people to understand how to say anything,
Yeah.
or at least start and be open to sharing and talking, right?
Yeah, but I think it's having these conversations which are important. And
Yeah.
it's like, if you're saying something because you think you need to fill silence, just really think about what you're going to say. I
Yeah.
had so many people, and funnily enough, we've just literally 2 hours before this podcast, I've just finished recording a podcast with a girl who's had 4 subsequent miscarriages before she had her son. And she said people would say to her, at least you can get pregnant. At least you can try again. And it's
No.
anything that starts with at least.
No.
Really think about what you're saying. And I
Oh,
think it's opening up the conversation to
yeah.
sort of highlight to people, because some people have never had a
Goodness
conversation
gracious.
with someone that's lost
Yeah.
before in any sense,
In
and
any sense, right?
don't know what to say. I
Gosh,
think I've
meant well, right? I'm sure they meant well, but goodness gracious, you hear that afterwards, you're like, or on the outside of it, go, oh man.
read the room. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
those were leaving your lips, and you were probably watching that, going, "This is not going to hit their ears well at all."
yeah.
No, I can't take that back.
I think the worst thing was someone
Ooh.
said to me probably about 8 or 9 weeks after Poppy had died, and they said, "Oh, think yourself lucky. I've got a daughter at the moment. She's going through the terrible twos and she's a nightmare, I'm like, I think I'd rather have my
I think
child.
I'll take that. Yeah,
And you just
wow.
think, what is the matter with people?
I mean, I do the reverse of that all the time. I mean, I don't we don't like to call them terrible anything. They're confusing twos because they're trying to figure out their world of emotions, and you have to remember that. But I do the opposite all the time. I hear a story. It was a story yesterday on some three year old. Somehow I didn't even go into details because I didn't want to know the details. Got lost in the woods for like hours,
Oh my God.
and the parents, I don't know how they stumbled across him, like found him, but anyway, that's all I caught was like the 3 year old, and he was found, like thought to be missing, was just wandering around the woods for 4 hours. And I'm like, oh goodness, I'll take my son sticking a spoon in his nose any day over almost losing my child. Like,
Yeah.
how do you not reverse that and say something like that to you, that, well,
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
lucky you're not. No,
Yeah. No, no, there's no lucky about it.
there's no lucky
Um,
about that.
and people might listen to me now and think I sound really, I don't know, flippant about the whole experience. I think you have to, you don't have to, but I have owned my experience
Yeah,
to the point where I feel so incredibly strongly about trying to help other people,
yeah,
because this is such a dark place. And I'm extremely lucky because I've gone
yeah,
on to have a little boy, and he is amazing. His name is Freddie. And the pregnancy was, even though I had the perfect pregnancy with Poppy, it was the most tormented 9 months of my life, in terms of, oh my God, is he going to be okay? Oh my God, is it,
yeah,
and
sure,
it was just so anxiety ridden. And you talked about postnatal depression, etc., etc. It wasn't until after I had Freddie that's when things like the postnatal depression, you guys call it postpartum depression, um, and things like PTSD that that occurred, that well sort of occurred, it reared its ugly head probably about 2 or 3 months before the birth. And I opted for elective C-section this time to prevent any panic or any, it was all planned, it was all calm. um but yeah, it has thrown some real interesting emotions in the mix, where
yeah,
you sort of like, I don't know how to parent without total fear that I'm going to lose
sure,
the child that I love more than anything in the world.
yeah. And I don't think that ever, to some degree, goes away. I mean, wife and I talk about it all the time. Like you can't. There's things that you just can't have a tangible answer to as a parent. And we try, and you write all sorts of books and blogs and articles and anything. And I think the best advice that I've ever swallowed entirely is the fact that somebody just flat out said, like, this sucks. Like, this is not easy. You're going to be in
Mm,
survival mode for a good couple years,
mm,
and you're going to make mistakes. But nobody wants to say that either, and you kind of just brush all of it under the rug and just go, okay, well, buy this, do this, try that, say this, and it'll work. Don't worry. No, it's not. It might for a second, and then tomorrow will be a whole nother story, and you're left
yeah,
looking for another. But it doesn't.
it's terrifying. And
It
you
is.
think, you experience loss, I can't bear to experience it again. And so it adds another layer to the onion of parenting,
Yeah.
which is already incredibly complex. And
Yeah.
that the postnatal depression is something which, again, is an incredibly dark place, because you almost feel
Yeah.
embarrassed. And you just think, this is something which is so incredibly normal for a lot of
Yeah.
women. It's horrendous, but it is
Absolutely.
normal because a lot of people experience it. And
Yeah.
again, it's hidden away.
Yeah.
Like child loss, it's not really talked about that much. And you just think, there's just not enough out there to
Yeah.
support women going through it.
Yeah. Well, that's why I said, I appreciate like hearing this story, and
Mm.
allowing people to hear it as well.
Mm.